Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Neil Haley Show and Your Beautiful Day here on the Gratitude Radio Network, the great simulcast that we've been doing, talking to such amazing people of a variety of backgrounds with unbelievable stories of gratitude. And I'm excited to welcome the program. First, one of my co-hosts, Jen Mogg. Jen, how are you? And I know you're excited about our guest. And every week we just have such very, very diverse, interesting people.
Hey Neil, hi everyone, and thank you for listening and being with us today on the Gratitude Radio Network. I'm your host, Jen Mogg, Mother of Gratitude. And I want to welcome you to the show, as well as my co-host and life coach, because God knows I need one, Pearl Sharenza.
Hey everybody, my name is Pearl Sharenza, and I am the owner of Women's Successful Living, and I'm so excited to be part of the show. And Jen, yes, we all need a life coach. So I just want to also remind everybody, even I have a life coach. So I'm excited. I'm going to hand it back over to you. I want to get right into our amazing special guest. So take it away.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Gratitude is one of the things that I live by, and gratitude is what I think is needed to change the world. And we hope that your beautiful day today starts with gratitude, as we have a ton of gratitude for our guest. I didn't think we would ever have a guest like this, I have to say. But then again, I didn't know Neil. This is so relevant and so needed. And she is a woman of all women. It's Dr. Angela Sadler Williamson, educator, documentary filmmaker, author, and yes, she is a member of Rosa Parks' family and the history, the American history that we've all grown up with. And she's living out and just letting her light shine for everyone. And I want to thank you for being here today with us.
It is such an honor and a pleasure. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. I'm trying not to cry.
It's fantastic. It's, again, we're all about gratitude, and it's all about everything. And how have you been holding up during the pandemic? Again, we're getting into the 6th month. How did you have to shift and stuff with it?
Well, luckily, I was already, because you mentioned I was an educator, so I was mostly teaching online, if not hybrid. So unlike a lot of my friends who work in education, who had to really, at the last minute scramble and put everything together online, I just know that I felt so blessed, because I literally didn't have to do a lot of that work and turn it around really quickly. And so the transition into COVID, I mean, as a mother, I mean, there's a bit of fear there. But luckily for me, at the time that COVID hit and completely shut down, I was already working on my children's book. And I had signed up to be part of this speakers group. And the person that's in charge of that speakers group, she's a life coach like Pearl. And I will always remember the first meeting we had a few weeks after pretty much everything shut down in California. And we were really deemed here as a hot spot because I'm in Southern California. And she gave us such great advice. She said, now is the time that we can choose how we will get to the other side, because we will get to the other side of this. We all have a choice to make. We can live in complete fear, or we can use what we've been given to see what the other side is. And at the time, this is a time where I think everybody in the world is given a time right now where we can listen. Yes. Because think about it, it's hard for us to listen because we're so busy. Now in California, we're busy because I did mention I did hybrid and online, but I did go to a class, face to face. So, in California, it's all about the traffic here. and so we spend so much time in traffic that if we think about one of those important skills, listening, it's really hard because we have so much going on. But at this time, I really listened to her and her positive energy. And I had to think about it. I mean, yes, there was still, there's still fear there, but I had to look at what I can do with that fear. And so one of the things I did with that fear was, luckily I was still working on this book, so that helped a lot. But one of the things I did was I started to listen to my students, and my students weren't scared about the work online. They were scared about everything else. They were scared about their lives changing so drastically and changing immediately from day to day. And so one of the things that I did was I started a Facebook group, and all of you know this well, is that those groups can be so positive. And I started one. It started out as professors helping students navigate COVID-19. And then I realized that I couldn't do this alone because I'm not a licensed life coach. I'm not a licensed, we also have transformational coaches and people who are licensed in yoga. So all of those people that I knew, I reached out to, and really that's what helped me. It really helped me because having all of those professionals come in and teach us how to navigate emotionally through something we had no control over, it wasn't just the students at that point, it was really helping me. So I had to reach out to others. And I think that's so important right now. I know you asked that one simple question, but that's
great
how it all came
educator answer,
to
and
a
that's
head for me,
fine.
is learning how to depend on the expertise of others.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally get that, Dr. Angela, because you're right in what I do. Because I normally my clients, we would meet face to face. You know, we're sitting one-to-one in a really comfortable environment, and so to be thrown like right into, oh my gosh, got to do Zoom, and you're right. I mean, life changes, and I used to live in Southern California, so I get traffic and all that. And you're right, listening is, it's so we haven't done that well, and that for me, coming out of all of this and through this, and hopefully coming through the other end, that's my hope, is that everybody learns that new way of listening. I have many teacher friends, and they said the same thing, that they were more stressed out about how the kids would receive the education online, and it was more, they said they were feeling like they were becoming a coach on how to handle the changes and the ebb and flow of the changes, and how fast, like you said, so rapid change. And so, yeah, that's really powerful. I'm glad you were able to, to create that group. It's funny you said that, because I've been talking to Jen about doing an online summit about something around that same subject area.
It's so important. And I know we've been in this for a while, and everyone thinks it's our new normal, but still so many people are still trying to learn to struggle through these changes. And where at first there was the fear, and then there was, okay, I just need to survive, and then there was hope. But then when we finally had hope, then we had to go backwards again, and that's when the shutdowns happen again. And I think people are just trying to get through with their emotions intact. And what I've realized, and this is just from personal experience, but when I had the honor of working on a book with 29 other women, where most of them really were these transformational coaches, life coaches, yoga experts, nutritional specialists, I learned a lot from them, and learned that it's not just the physical part of us that takes the beating, it's the emotional part. And when that emotional part takes the beating, that's when it starts a trickle effect of everything else. And so what can we do to that? How can we answer that? And I think if, especially all of us here are so sensitive to that we feel the need to do what we were called to do in a bigger way than we've ever felt before.
I agree. I completely agree 1,000%. To me, sometimes the silence and sheltering in place has been so loud, because I'm used to being around people. I'm used to being on stage. I'm used to being in the middle of the parades in Gasparilla. And it's been so loud, but at the same time, to be able to sit and listen is kind of extraordinary, because we don't get to do that on a collective basis, the entire world just going in and revaluing our lives, ourselves, what's important, what's really important, where is our faith, and where we're being tested. But speaking of being tested, I want to use this time to go back. I want to go back and tell me from the beginning, the legacy that you were handed as a child and the family that you grew up in.
Well, and this is where I have the unique eye as a storyteller. So I mean, I grew up with a number of heroes, and one of those heroes was Rosa Parks. But and this is why I like to tell my story, because Rosa Parks was my hero from afar. How she becomes my cousin is that I actually end up marrying her first cousin. And so I have two ways of looking at Rosa Parks. I have that hero worship, which never went away, but it's the worship that we all have from afar when we don't really know someone. And then I have the other side of that worship, that hero worship, that comes when in 1998, when I met her for the first time. And it's always because we always talk about young people and what we say and do, and definitely I was it. And when I started dating my husband and had started to form relationships with his aunts who are very, very close to Cousin Rosie, kept telling me, oh, well, Cousin Rosie comes to all the family events, Cousin Rosie this. Now, for a while there, I didn't even know who Cousin Rosie was. And so finally, I was like, well, who's this Cousin Rosie? And they're like, oh, Rosa Parks. And I'm like, wait, what? You guys are just, I mean, just like we talk about all our family members. This is just how they were talking about her. But I never believed that, even though they were telling me this, that eventually that I would meet her in person and that she would just show up to a family event. And she did. And so on April 18th, 1998, there was a family bridal shower, and everybody's like, oh, look at who's here. And I turn and look, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's my history book. It's like a pop-up. You know, the pop-up books that we used to love.
Yeah.
It's like Rosa Parks pops up. And it still wasn't hitting me until, I mean, and at this point, she's much older. I mean, she's probably late 70s, getting towards 80s at this point. And she hands me her little gift, and she gives me her gift, and I open it up. It's one of the last books that she'd written. It's called Quiet Strength. It's very small. I mean, all of you would love the read of this book. And inside the book, of course, she transcribes it to me, and she says, welcome to our family. And all I can do is just look at it like, oh my goodness, they're right. Not only does she show up to family events, but I'm part of this family. And it hits you like a Mack truck, because you're thinking, wow, one of the people that I admired growing up and reading that story in my history books and learning about her, because both my parents, even though I grew up outside the Los Angeles area, both of them are from the South. And when they were children, they were coming through segregation. So, I mean, all of this is like reality to them. And even my mom is like, wow, the woman I saw on television, my daughter's now part of this family. But it's funny because even in 1998, I knew I had someone special. I mean, to the point of being part of this family. But a lot of times we don't realize the importance of our legacy until tragedy hits, in a way. And for me, it was personal, it was professional. Both of those tragedies came to a head in 2015. And that's when I realized that I had this important story to tell, with using my Aunt Carolyn as a muse, because she's considered one of Rosa Parks' caretakers, and I needed to tell that story. And so it was really, Jennifer, it brings me to 2005, when I realized that I had such an important legacy, that if I didn't get those stories down, that we would lose that legacy, because we were already starting to lose it. So that's when I started. I went back to what I always call my first love, video, and went back to do that documentary, not knowing that documentary would change my life. And that's because at the time I was in such personal turmoil that I didn't set my intentions right when I did that documentary. So because I didn't set my intentions right, that even though the documentary would do really well, I wasn't realizing the changes I was making and the impact I was making because I wasn't able to see through my own blocks my roadblocks that I was putting there.
That happens.
And so the realization when you first met her, you never knew that she was going to change your life. You just thought, oh, it's a family member meeting somebody. Yes, she's famous. Yes, she's one of the biggest important stories in American history, but you never thought that would become part of you at that time.
No, I didn't. And it's a great thing that you're mentioning this, Neil, because I even mentioned that when I wrote that forward in Women Who Illuminate, that, you know, she just became family at that point. And even you would think that because my background has always been in video, you would think when she passed away in 2005, that I would have come to that realization that, oh, I had such this great legacy here, because I was hearing stories I had never read in history books. But it wasn't clicking because I wasn't really, like we were talking about, listening. It took me getting to personally a low point to when I started to listen and realize that those stories were really important, not only just to our family, but to how we understand our history and how it pertains to the civil rights movement.
And I think that's so powerful because, you know, my boys are 23 and almost 21. So what they were learning in history, not even 4 or 5 years ago, is so different today. And my husband and I will bring up things like, what are you talking about? We didn't learn that in school. So there's so much. So I think it's important to carry and to keep continuing sharing her story, because her story impacted so many things, so many lives, so many. And really, even today, the things that are happening today, if we look back, it's still intertwining and happening. And if we lose her intention and where she came from and what she stood for, and not carry that story forward, like what you're doing, I fear what happens, in the future. I mean, our oldest we were blessed to have him through adoption, and he's a mixed race child. So we, in our family, being the dynamics we always are about, the history. And I think it's really important that you're carrying this through. And, it also goes back, like what you said about listening too, like to hear, oh, cousin Rosie, you're not putting those together. I mean, it's so true. It's a great example about how we have to listen, because when we don't listen, not only do we miss important parts of who cousin Rosie was, right? We also miss important parts of what our young are telling us and what we need to hear of what's happening in the world.
Exactly. I would have to say that I've received so many wonderful, positive comments since the documentary has, had its run over the last few years. But I think one of the comments I received that I still remember to this day is I was screening this documentary. It was Black History Month, 2019, I believe. And I was screening it inside this other screenwriter's home. And he looked at me, and this guy is just amazing. He's a speechwriter. He's worked with a lot of politicians. He's done a lot of script writing work on a lot of major shows. But when he looked at me and said, I feel like I'm part of your family, then I knew that I was now doing the job I was supposed to do. If I can write something where you view it and you feel that you are part of the family, which makes you part of the movement, then I'm doing what I was put here on this earth to do. And I mean, to me, that's better than anything I could ever receive, because that means that I am honoring the legacy of a woman who fought her entire life for human rights.
So true. And oh my, it's a very, very powerful situation. So from that documentary, you talked about meeting different people. Where did that kind of lead once you said, I'm going to do this documentary, the steps after? I'm going to start this documentary. Who did you reach out to? Who mentored you and helped you through that process to get to the finished product?
I love that question. Okay, so a lot of times when I was telling people I was doing this documentary, because all of you probably know this with documentaries, sometimes they never they never get finished, because it's not like a regular script. It might take them 10 years to finish it. I've heard, I mean, some of the Oscar nominated, even winning documentaries, when I hear it took them 10 years, I'm like, wow, that's dedication. And for me, it took me 2 years. But even some family members were asking me, are you going to complete this? And so I was excited about it, because here I was a little girl, and now I'm part of this family, and the family's letting me tell this story. Okay, because let's look at it for real people. I'm an in-law, and they're bringing me in like I'm, the blood of Rosa Parks is, running through my veins. And so, but people are like, oh, that's, they would be like, oh, that's nice, or are you going to? I mean, and then you have the relatives who will always tell you exactly how they feel. Will you finish this, and things like this. So, I mean, I felt like, in a way, that was the extra motivation I needed to say, and at this point, I had already completed a few things, like a couple of degrees and other stuff like that. But that just didn't matter. So I mean, I felt like, okay, I had to do this. I wanted to do it. But at the same time, just working on this documentary was healing me too, from the inside as well. So when the documentary is getting to the end, and it's to the point where I actually sat on it for maybe 3 or 4 months before I started entering it into film festivals. But when it came to the end of it, I had only, my intention from the beginning was, because I was at a professional crossroads, was that this was just going to be used to boost my CV. And maybe one day I could be a full-time tenure professor somewhere. That was my dream. And so I never saw film festival circuits. I never saw that, except for Dr. Jean Theoharis, who was one of the ladies that I interviewed. Kathleen Flynn, who wrote all the original music for the documentary, who actually lives in Ireland. And a friend that I worked with for over 20 years ago. We started off at a small station together. He was the editor, and all 3 of them came to me at 3 separate times at the end of putting everything together and said that I should look at film festivals. And because I had been out of the business for so long, I looked at film festivals like a consumer looks at film festivals. I told him, I said, well, based on my budget, there's no way I'm going to get into the Palm Springs International Film Festival, Sundance, Tribeca. I'm not going to get into those film festivals. I'm not going to do that. And they said, no, you need to go to these sites. There are thousands of film festivals that would love to see your documentary. And so I did the research, Nell. And when I did the research and told them, I said, okay, I'll try, because I still wasn't feeling my complete strong self yet. They said, okay, great. All 3 of them said, great, do this. But they said that educational version, because my educational version was so different. And it is because at the end of each segment, there are discussion prompts for educators to use as talking points. And they said, that's not going to work, because they're not going to stop in the middle of your film and start talking about it. So you need to re-edit it. So I had to go back to the edit bay and re-edit it for the film festival circuit. And so you literally, what is on Amazon right now is actually version 2, because I had to re-edit it. And so when I did, and the editor sent it back to me, Tom sent it back to me, I said, okay, I'll go on. And I went to, there's 2 platforms. I went to Film Freeway, because I could figure it out, and started to apply. And within weeks of applying, it was already accepted into its first film festival. Literally in November, I got the call. In December is when it made its premiere in LA at the Culver City Film Festival. So, I mean, it completely blew me away to a point where I think even that first film festival, I know I was there, but I wasn't there, because I was thinking, this was just supposed to get me to go into little classrooms and say hi and let's talk. I mean, I wasn't expecting to look at it on a big screen and thinking, oh my goodness, this is where the same big screen that I just seen like Transformers on with my son. Oh my goodness, there's my documentary. It was, I mean, it was one of those out of body experiences. But when the film was done and there was a question and answer after, and people started to tell me how they felt, then it really, it was the journey, Neil, and it was a long journey. It was 2 years, but it was a great journey of seeing the perspectives of how other people really saw this documentary and what it did for them personally. And it was just this ride that I couldn't believe that I was on, especially they had an award ceremony and they had sent an email and said, you probably want to come to this award ceremony, but I went by myself. I didn't think anything of it. And then when it won, I was just like, oh my goodness. In fact, I didn't even think they were calling me. I was talking to somebody else and they yelled my name. They're like, you need to come up. You just won Best Documentary. And it was like, whoa, I what? And then I told the lady who's now since my really good friend, I'm like, excuse me 1 second. And I go and they shove this award in my hand and you'll see this picture. It's on my website. And it's like, and I'm in this red dress and I'm like, cheese, because I was completely blown away to the point where, and then I walk to my car, I just put the little award down, I take a picture of it and then send it off and try to, tag everybody because you know how we do in social media. And I'm like, we won Best Documentary. And I'm driving home and my husband calls me and he never calls me. And he's like, do you know your Facebook is blowing up right now? I'm like, my Facebook never blows up. I'm like, it is? What is? He's like, you just told everybody that this documentary that some people didn't think I would ever finish just won Best Documentary at this film festival. You're first time film festival, first time filmmaker in my late 40s. And I mean, it was one of those experiences that even while I'm telling you this now, I still can feel everything that happened that night because it was something I could have never expected happening in my whole life.
See, and I think that's there's such a story there because it's like, I'm thinking about, what you talked about earlier about fear, and I'm thinking about, belief, and all these words are coming to me. And these are things I talk about with women. We do a yearly retreat, and these are things we address for a whole weekend. And the big thing is fear holds us back, and the fear allows us to not believe that what you thought was, I'll get it done. It's like, it was worthy of an award. It was worthy of winning the award, and that's the thing too. I learned there's a lesson there. Anytime, whether you think you're going to or not going to, you always bring that support with you because you just don't know, right? You just don't know. And I've done that myself where like, I'll go to something like, oh, you could just stay home, honey. It's okay. And then bam, it's like, wow, and it's like, and that goes back to the lack of belief that we have something deep down that, and I'm just going to put it out there that God says, this is yours, you're going to own it. And this is what I'm going to do with you with it, and I mean, and look what you're doing to carry on her legacy and to bring that out. And then what an honor for her to say, and I think it's cool. You said, I was just an in-law. It reminded me of my husband's mom was from a family of 13. I met them all on one side and like 10 on the other side. I met them all in 1 week and I'm like going, all these in-laws,
I know.
I could just see you going, she's just an in-law, but how powerful to take that fear and come through that fear, take that belief and fall through that belief, and to see this documentary, what started out as just, I just do a little something to get me in a school.
Yes.
Is like how so powerful. And I'm sitting here as we're talking going, well, we should make sure you go to here. And like all these ideas, especially now with the teachers being homeschooled, kind of bring it full circle. And I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but bring it full circle to the teachers that are trying to figure out what can I bring to my kids. And it goes back, Jen, to the idea I have of bringing some students in as a teacher. What history can I teach them that speaks to them at their level, right? And I think that's what you have here.
History. And that's what Dr. Angela has done. Take me back, because I'm a filmmaker too. And a screenwriter. When you said doing this documentary was healing you, because when my writing helps me, heals me. One, we didn't give the name of the documentary. Can we give the name of the documentary?
Oh, yes, of course. It's called My Life with Rosie.
Good. That's what I thought it was, but I wanted to make sure.
Yes.
So My Life with Rosie, how did making that help heal you? Because I think it's also going to help heal our nation.
You know, oh, there's so many things there. So if I look at just internally, and we'll talk about just the perspective of how we treat people in human rights. But for me, at that point in my life, it was so important. It wasn't just that I was hearing, these unknown stories about Rosa Parks, because I wanted to make Rosa Parks a three-dimensional character. And because every time I saw Rosa Parks, she was just like this one-dimension character. It was this one event, and this event was really important, but it was this event that kind of limited how people saw her. So I wanted to create that three-dimensional character. And then I started interviewing my aunt, and I called them the church ladies because they all grew up in the same church these ladies are in their 60s and 70s, and the one was 87. So now she's got to be at least 92.
Wow.
These ladies grew up in the same church since like the 40s and 50s. And these ladies are out there starting nonprofit programs for children, starting food programs, putting children and the elderly together. They decided, oh, this park needs to be refurbished. So they start selling bricks. I mean, and I'm looking at these ladies and I'm thinking, you have this one thing that you are letting pull you down, and it doesn't even compare to not only the stories you're hearing about Rosa Parks and what she went through, because that's why Dr. Jean Theoharis was so important, because of the research she had done on Cousin Rosie. But then I'm listening to these ladies that are like 30, 40 years older than me at this point, and they've got more energy and have seen more through life than I have, and they're not letting them stop what they're doing. And so at that point, I knew when I told that story, I wanted to tell stories of these women who we could just probably see in the store, or women that we might we might sit next to at church, or we may meet them up for coffee every now. These are women who are doing these extraordinary things in a city that people have completely abandoned and say there's nothing good happening in Detroit. And so it really, that empowered me from within, because I knew I wanted to put Detroit and these women in a light that other people could see. But then at the same time, I started to see the bigger picture of who Rosa Parks was, which I never knew. And you mentioned your sons, and even I was taking U.S. history in college, and that's supposed to be a more comprehensive U.S. history. I still didn't understand the depthness of who Rosa Parks was until I started doing the research and understood the greatness of what this woman was doing without a lot of fanfare. And she got it towards the end of her life, and it was well deserved, but she never looked for that. What she looked for was she leaving a mark of future activists to make sure that human rights was protected, and how she constantly did that, and her way of doing that. And so I had this twofold story that I got to start to unfold as a filmmaker. And really what it did to me is it not only gave me a lot more respect for who Rosa Parks was, but then I look at the respect that I had for all of these women, and I started to ask myself, how can I start to leave my own legacy as an educator and as a mother and as a person of color? So, I mean, because these women are doing all this stuff and they're not thinking twice about it. And I'm just exhausted listening to their stories. Well, I need a vacation after listening to everything you're doing. And there's that one part where you'll look, and it's probably my longest segment, and I couldn't edit it down because it was like, whoa, these women are just, I mean, they make me tired just listening to them. And so, you know, Jennifer, I was just thinking there's just so much I haven't done because I let myself get in the way. And so that started to chip away at that. And it started to help me open my eyes more to what do I have to do? What is my legacy? When I'm no longer here and there's someone who comes across my name, what can they see as what my legacy was? And so, I mean, it really started to get me thinking like that, to a point where I could understand what was happening with all these people when they decided to have this Montgomery bus boycott, is that they weren't just thinking, okay, they're thinking about what's the legacy we can do so that other people can have the same rights as everybody should have. And so it changed me, and it really makes me feel that as a filmmaker and as a storyteller, that's the direction I want to take. I want to tell stories like that, and that's what I aspire to do when I do those kinds of, when I choose a project, is that I want to be that storyteller that not only celebrates legacies, but leaves one of her own.
You know, it's very interesting when you talk about all this, because then so you're talking about leaving a legacy. There was the documentary. Now we've gone through all the challenges of COVID and the racial divide again, even further kind of going back. Now you're carrying that baton forward. What do you do next to leave a legacy? Because the documentary's one, but now you have to look at more than just the documentary. You have to look at, I'm carrying this legacy till I die based on the stories I've heard about Rosa Parks. How can I use this to unite? And especially, you didn't think it was going to happen in 2020 like it has. So what were you like, had those plans? I see you as a planner, as a teacher. What are your like legacy plans? Yeah.
And that's such a great question, Neil, because when and that's why I was talking about, and all of you understand when I talk about setting my intentions, because I didn't set it, and then all of a sudden, thank goodness, God was looking out for me, because he had to lead me by my nose to these doors that were opening for me. And that's where that children's book, My Life with Rosie, A Bond Between Cousins, comes into play, because Pearl talks about the full circle, going back to that educational component. And luckily, Tom, and I say Tom the editor because I actually worked with two Toms. Tom was, I also had another Tom who was a photographer, but Tom the editor had to remind me after 2 years of screening Rosie all over the country, that he said, you still have this educational component that we kind of tore apart for this. And he said, and so in January of this year, Tom actually re-put that back together for me and put it into 2 parts to include those original discussion prompts in there. But one of the things that he did, and he also, because there's this bus scene that has 4 generations of Williamsons in there, which is 4 generations of Rosa Parks' family. And I showed that little scene. It's about 5 minutes. I showed that to a 2nd grade class, and I was able to capture their attention. But I realized, Neil, that I didn't have anything for elementary school children, because in the beginning, remember, this was just supposed to help me get into doors, into higher ed. And maybe I was also thinking, I was thinking higher ed, but I was also thinking secondary, junior high, and in high school. So maybe that, but definitely not elementary. But I saw how these bright young children took to just watching that bus scene. And then I had all this wonderful artwork of them drawing the bus. It was just, it was one of those days. And that's why I love this film, because whenever I talk about it, I feel like it's a spiritual moment for me, because, watching these little children grasp this idea of something that, happened years before they were born, but I still didn't have I didn't have a way to really reach that segment of the population. And so by writing that forward in Women Who Illuminate, I really formed the bond with the publisher. Her name is Kate Butler. And we talked about like next steps, like what you said. And at the time, they a big toy company released this gorgeous Barbie doll on Rosa Parks, but I thought the product description was really limiting. It was almost like going back to our basic history books, and I didn't want children to know that limiting description of her. And so the book publisher said to me, she said, well, why don't you write a children's book? Now, you think I would have learned my lesson about just embracing things that I'm not comfortable with, but I didn't. And I told her, I said, no, I don't think so. I've never wrote a children's book. I mean, I can sit there and talk to them, but I don't know how to write a children's book. And she said, okay, am I not your publisher? And do I not have all these children's books? And she told me, she said, if this is your next step, this is what you should do. So in November, we started writing this children's book. And you know, when we were writing this children's book, we had hopes that it would make it Black History Month, but then we knew it wouldn't because, you know, illustrations and stuff. But then we thought maybe April, and then COVID hit. And so we had to push it back again. And so when we pushed it back in April, okay, and this is the truth, I promise, I'm not psychic or anything, but this is how it happened, is that when we pushed it back in April, she said, why don't you give me another date? And I thought, well, okay, well, we're all in COVID now. Children, parents love summer reading programs. Let's aim for summer. But then I said to Kate, I said, you know, why don't we launch this before this holiday that's known to African Americans, especially African Americans in Texas? It's called Juneteenth. And she's like, Juneteenth, what is that? And I said, oh, well, let me send you this Wikipedia. This is Juneteenth. And she's like, okay, well, I guess that works. Now, we didn't know what would happen on May 31st. And then we didn't know after what happened to George Floyd on May 31st, with the nationwide, then turn international civil unrest, that people would start to really talk about what Juneteenth is. And so with that turning out, then all of a sudden, oh, did you hear there's this book coming out about Rosa Parks? I mean, at that point, I really started to see what the universe had been telling me in 2015, had I just listened, could have saved me a lot of emotional distress, was that God was building me for a time, and I needed to walk in that timing. And so with that children's book, Nil, that hit the next part of the legacy that I wanted to do, because Rosa Parks spent her entire life motivating youth to be activists. To be activists for human rights, to be activists for people who are not getting what they should in life. And so what I wanted to do is take that philosophy that I had come to love and try to portray in that documentary. I wanted to take that to children. And I wanted to take it to children so that they can understand. And how do we do this is that, you know, my book publisher tells me you have to do this through a children's book. And at the end of your children's book, you need to challenge those children. So I challenge those children by learning how to not only, how can they respect differences in others, but then I tell them, you know, how can you make friends with someone who's different than you? And then, you know, how can you find other people like yourself? And these are ways that I know that Rosa Parks, this is why she still exists today, because she spent so much time with youth like my Aunt Carolyn and other people who still, to this day, these people are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they continue on Rosa Parks' legacy. And so I figured that was the heart of where we needed to get to next, was that young generation of children, and get them on the movement. And that's what that book did. And when it was released the day before Juneteenth, not only did a lot of people understand then what Juneteenth meant, but then a lot of parents, we're talking parents, didn't matter what color they were, didn't matter you know, where they lived. Everybody wanted to know how we can talk to our children about racism, about discrimination, about activism and human rights. And then all of a sudden, there's this book out there for them to do it.
Well,
And
and
so
I think you could say, because you've got that connection, I feel it. And I think your church ladies that you talked about, and the connection to our Rosie that has, you know, gone before us. I think like you said, we weren't listening, and but now here you are she's using your voice to help carry on her legacy. And you're right, our young don't know how to, and having conversations. I mean, we're in a day right now where people are afraid to talk about, you know, their political views, because people are become this hatred, and we've, with this divide. And it's so to bring that together, and for parents to have something to talk about, because it's starting younger. And Jen and I've talked about this. My concern is we don't get back to schools, and we don't get back the kids back in socializing. And then what happens then when, if they're in a family right now that doesn't have, my family is a prime example, Jen, and I think Neil knows my story. My dad became racist towards my son. I was a daddy's girl. I had to cut my dad out of my life because my son came before him. And so my concern is that if we don't get something or give something to our parents and our youth to hear at their level. So great job that your publicist said, listen, we need to, do this. And I think it was all divine intervention when the date came about. So I think it's amazing. So, and I want to ask you this question though, because carrying on a legacy can be very heavy.
Yeah.
It can be very heavy. And so what do you do with that? Like when you feel overwhelmed, what are some of the things you do to take care of you and to take care of what you need to do to handle and care the heaviness of carrying a legacy like this?
Thank you. So, and I'm still working through that. I try not to let it get me down, especially because I know I've been given such a gift and I need to cherish it. And a lot of times I feel that I've walked away from gifts because I've just felt the burden of it all. And so that has happened because, even though this has been a 5-year journey for me, it's now with everything just the perfect timing. More and more people are seeing it. And so I'm getting more and more feedback that's completely shocking me now that you didn't get when people didn't think I would, actually complete a project. And so, what's really helped me, I'll be honest with you, especially with COVID, is learning how to take charge of my own self-care and learning how to do my walks and just read for fun. I love that because that's why I'm an educator, because I love to read. But other things too is that I am really, and I don't even know, I started this to help students out, and it's now called Educators Who Care Group on Facebook. But because of that group and because being linked to so many positive women, even when I feel like I'm down, I can reach out to one of those ladies and do a Facebook Live. And then that not only pumps me up, but then I realize by doing those Facebook Lives, when I have friends that are connected with me and reach out to me and say, I was feeling so much and I just went to one of those Facebook Lives and, things like that. And so really, I think when I was created as a helpmate. And so when I'm able to do things like that, I think that's where a lot of my self-care actually comes into play too, because it helps me as well. So there's times that I do feel it and it's hard not to, especially in your mind, you're thinking, hey, what are they thinking? Okay, and then that there's a certain thing in it, and this comes because my mom is from the South. So there's a certain southernness that I have to keep to. And I'm like, sometimes I wish I didn't have to, because sometimes you just want to slap someone, but you can't. And I want people to realize I'm human too, but then thank God I have so much positive people around me. I didn't know what I thought of when I came to this show. It's like, wow, this gentleman wants me on the show. The minute I logged in, I felt the positive energy and I'm thinking, my goodness, I can go on. It doesn't matter what people say. And so I think what my universe is telling me now is if I just continue to move forward, even when I feel I can't carry on another day, that opportunities will open up for me to be connected to positive people so that I can continue to move forward. So I think that's just so important. I think that's what everybody needs right now, is
Yes.
They need that positive energy to move forward. So
Exactly. And I think that's a key point for sure. Jen, I know we're getting close to our hour. So go ahead with your favorite questions to come through,
After show.
and then we'll find out where we can get the book and everything. But go to your next question.
Thank you. Well, one is that children don't see color; they just see souls. They just see it. So having a book that backs up why she was on a bus, why she said no, and gives them the strength to stand up in their own life. It always gave me strength. My Shiro of Shiros is Tina Turner. I've had my share of Ikes. I didn't think I'd make it through this past one, but during my mediation, I channeled Tina and I said I was going to make that woman proud.
Yes.
So it's one of those things that we really uplift each other. And going into something that's unknown, I know what you're saying, and having, when you open yourself up to the burden of the legacy, taking a second of gratitude and just focus on appreciation, and that'll take that tie off. That's so heavy, that weight. Appreciation. You're thankful of your past. You appreciate right now, and you have gratitude for the future. And that's like your fishing line going forward, girl. So when you pull it all in and you realize this isn't just one fish, this is the jubilee, this is the jubilation, then go with it and take the fear out of it, because there's a lot of things that this baton has for you, and this is just the tip of it, but there's a lot that you're going to be given, and you've got to run with it, because it's not just Rosie's legacy, it's all of ours. And then if you start feeling down, spin around and look behind you, because all of your ancestors are with you. And
I love pictures, as you can tell.
Yeah, I do too. And those, your ancestors are with you as you're cheering you on to keep going, because it's a quality for all of us, and
Thank you.
we're all family. We're all family.
And that's so true. And Jen, you used the word Shiro. I mean, Dr. Angela, like you talked about having your group. That's what that's what Jen and that's what we are creating through doing this. And I have, my own little Shiro League of women, that we're uplifting each other, that we're strong, we're radiant. It's just a lot of great positivity and that self-care. And before we close up, I want to know, so you mentioned you have kids too, right? So what are they doing? Like, what are you doing with them to help carry on so that Rosie's legacy carries on through the generations? Because, you mentioned the church ladies, God bless them. They're, hope they won't unfortunately be around us forever. And then,
And one church lady said that. She said, "We're not going to be here forever." And I'm like, really? So one of the things that I did, because my son actually has the blood of Rosa Parks, running through his veins. I actually, when we shot this documentary, he was in junior high school, and I worked with his teachers to make sure that he was with us. So not only if you, it's on Amazon Prime, My Life with Rosie, and you look at the bus scene and you look at a little boy who is he's barely tall enough to reach the bus in a red shirt. That is my son. So, not only did I put him in the documentary, but then I also too put a camera mic in his hand and said, "Okay, now we're making you production assistant." So you have production credit too. So, I think it was important to include him on the project, and thank goodness all of his teachers worked with me on that. And even when we had the premiere in 2017, his friend was like, "No, you never mentioned you were part of this." And he's like, it's Rosa Parks, it's my cousin. But now to see him and to see my other cousin, who was 5 at the time and she's 10. And so you look at her 5 on the bus, and then you look at her now and she's 10, and she's actually reading the book that I wrote. It's to watch that. They don't know it now, but we've already planted the seeds of the legacy in them.
yeah.
And so to do that, I think as moms, and one mom asked me this one time and said, "Oh, your son must be so proud." I'm like, "No, he's my son, I'm mom," but they will see it. And so I planted that seed in him now, and he knows now. He's just like, "Okay, I'll go," because we went all over. But what it did was it opened his eyes to how other people live throughout the United States. And so I am just so blessed to have a school system that has been completely supportive of everything we've taken him on the last 5 years, because he's learned so much, but he's learned a lot about how to continue this legacy.
Oh, wow. It's a very, very impressive story for sure. And Jen's going to close us out as usual with a final summary and question. And then but we appreciate all that you've done and have come on the show for sure. Go ahead, Jen. Oh, Jen, you're on mute.
Sorry. Dr. Angela, where can people find you?
Right now, my website is drangelasadlerwilliamson.com. You can find me there. You can also find me reading the children's book on my Facebook fan page, My Life with Rosie, A Bond Between Cousins, if you definitely want your little ones to watch that. And the book, My Life with Rosie, A Bond Between Cousins, and the documentary, My Life with Rosie, both available on Amazon, along with my mom's book called Women Who Illuminate.
Wonderful. Thank you. We want to thank Pearl for being on the show today.
Oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait to reach out to you, Dr. Angela, afterwards about your book, Women Who Illuminate, because I think that's amazing. And thank you for honoring us with the story and the legacy. And I'm so excited to continue to follow you and learn more.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
And thank you, Neil, for another really amazing show. And thank you for all of our listeners, all of our gratitude goddesses out there, and everyone listening that want to bring gratitude to your life. We've been listening and spending time with Dr. Angela Sadler Williamson, educator, documentary filmmaker, author, amazing shero. Go check out her documentary, My Life with Rosie, that's on Amazon right now. And we look forward to having her back and seeing how much gratitude she has brought the world with her next project.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
And as you know, we always say, remember, you are blessed, you are loved, and you are sacred. Mwah. I love you. Have a beautiful day.
Wow. Jen, wow.
Wow. Holy,
I mean,
and you live down the street from her.
I live, okay, wait a minute. I live down the street from her. What a small, crazy world. But I'm just thinking, like, I grew up in history, and I grew up reading and about Rosa Parks. So it's like, this is just like so amazing. And you and I both have so many friends that the racial divide and the stigma of all of that, and to have somebody still alive, like, until we were introduced to about talking to Dr. Angela, I had no idea that somebody was still out there trying to carry on that legacy. And I recently, like in the past 6 months, thought, wow, with everything that's been happening, how is that story going to come to fruition? And here we are. Like, how awesome is that?
It's absolutely relevant. It's something, unfortunately, I think we're going to have for a very long time. And until people can plug into love and gratitude, it's something that we're just going to, it's that dark energy. To keep us divided in fear. And as long as we have people of light on the front line with Dr. Angela, with you and I, fighting it. I mean, I was one of the first people in my high school to have an interracial relationship.
Talk about first high.
He's still one of my best friends, and he only lives now he lives in Brandon. Kurt lives in Brandon, and his family didn't understand it. My family didn't understand it. The school didn't understand it.
No, you were in trouble.
I grew up in the city, so I can't imagine being in the South, where my parents are from the deep South, South Carolina, Newberry, South Carolina. My dad was from the other side of the railroad tracks in a mixed neighborhood, where his family never thought those three boys would ever be on the opposite side of the railroad tracks.
Well, and that's so true. I mean, I grew up in North Carolina, and through my parents left Jacksonville area at the end of my freshman year of high school. But during my freshman year of high school, my best friend started dating an African American young man, and he had a buddy, and the four of us just hung out together. I wasn't dating anybody, you know. I too young to even understand about dating. I didn't want to date. I just wanted to be friends. And I'll never forget, we went to a dance. And this is where, even though I look back and see the path my dad took with his racism, even back then, I was like oblivious to it, because I just believed everybody should be treated the same. I didn't
That's what
care.
they teach in school. That's what they teach in church until you realize the undercurrent's completely different. And you're like, what the heck's wrong with these people?
Right. And so I remember going to this dance, and I don't even remember what the song was, but the four of us were dancing. I think it was like the what's the one where you hold each other, you do the little it was some sort of train song, I think. But I remember it was, you know, my girlfriend, the guy she was dating, then me and his buddy, and the four of us. And somebody goes, "Oh, look at the Oreo, the moving Oreo." I'm like, and it like it didn't hit me. I'm like, moving
Oblivious.
Oreo. I'm like, and I think I remember saying to my girlfriend, "Aren't we doing some sort of trade dance?" She goes, "Pearl, like, come on, Pearl, you're not." And I'm like, I didn't see it, because I you know, and it was an eye-opening at that point at a young age to realize that my friends of color, my friends, what they have to deal with. And even fast forwarding now to with my son, and you know, we're going into the doctors, and the doctor going, "Well, where's your son?" I'm like, "He's right here." You know, it's like it's just crazy. And for us, and to think about Rosa Parks' story and where we are today and what's happening today with the divide again, it's you know, it's you. I wonder. We talk about this in my family. What is it going to take for this to stop? Like, so I think it takes people like Rosa Parks' family.
To go to a higher. Our consciousness has to. We have to evolve.
We have to evolve.
We have to evolve, but also it astounds me. It hurts me. You know, and when I say something hurts me, I have to do something about it.
Yeah.
It hurts me to see what's happening based solely on skin, because when I look at what happened with George, I am like, take me. Don't do that to him.
Right.
Take me. You know, that's my mentality.
Yeah.
And because of being MOG, being the mother of gratitude, you know, it's everybody's equal. And it's the conversation that you and I are having now that is the beginning, and that keeps needing to go is the white.
Well, and
white privilege. It's the white privilege.
It
and
is.
It's finally being called out to what it is, because I didn't understand it at first. I'm
and
like,
conversations
I made everything happen myself. But no, it's the white privilege, because George, that would have never happened if he was white.
Right.
That would have never happened.
And I think about
things would never have happened.
Right. And I think about how, you know, amazing that Dr. Angela is carrying the story, and like she wasn't even, like she said, she doesn't have she says, you know, I don't have her blood through me, but she has the understanding of what the story and why the path that we're on and that Rosa Parks saw that had to be changed. And to know that she is taking on, which is why I asked, you know, that can be very heavy, but knowing that she is taking on that legacy and finding ways for it to continue, not only for herself, but even teaching the younger generation within their family, her little cousin and her son, on how this is, you know, it's a responsibility. It's a big responsibility. And it's something we need to continue to carry on. We need the story to continue to be told. We need the story to be continued, unfortunately, to show what's happening. And I pray, and I know you pray, that one day the story will be like, how cool, look what they set in path, and so glad we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Aren't you happy that crap's over with? Because we're better people now.
Right.
That's what we really want to say.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know, at this point in time, I thought things would be completely different.
Yep.
I loved your question to her on why, you know, what is she doing to help herself with this big burden?
Yeah, it's huge.
Because nobody would ever have asked her that. What are you doing yourself to take care of yourself with what you, when she said, yes, I will take this. Yes, I'm going to do this, Doc. She had this little small thing happening. And then all of a sudden the world opened up, and it's going to be here for such a long period of time, because it's universal.
Yeah. And that's what I want to, as we close out today, that's what I want to and to share with our listeners, is that there's always a voice that's telling you need to do something. There's a voice that leads you to say, it sounds heavy and it sounds like a big responsibility. However, we're not going to be given that responsibility without help. We're not going to be given that responsibility without somebody being put in our path to say, hey, I'm here to help you. Let's lock arms and let's do it. So whatever that thing you're hearing and you're thinking, I can't do it, it's too big for me, it's time to stop being quiet with it. It's time to manifest it. And it's time to know that's definitely part of that pearl that you're shining. And you need to start cracking that oyster open and letting that pearl idea come out.
Ooh, I like that.
So
When we feel the burden is too heavy to carry, appreciation, appreciation, appreciation. And so just think of how much you appreciate it, have gratitude for it, and manifesting more gratitude and manifesting more really great things. Have the appreciation for that without the strings attached to it, just on its own, appreciate it. And then once you do that, then you can take more and you can take more and you can take more. Because at some point, everything that we've been given or manifesting becomes heavy.
Yep.
And the only way to do it is to do it with gratitude.
Absolutely. So on that note, Jen, as we close everybody out, remind everybody that what we leave them with and to carry themselves into the next week.
I want to thank you all for being with us on the Gratitude Radio Network, listening to Your Beautiful Day. I am Jen Mog and Pearl Sharenza. And as you go through your day and week, remember you are loved, you are blessed, and you are sacred. Mwah. We love you. Have a beautiful day. Bye.
Bye.